Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 18th. Well, a special day for me in the sense that I get to walk my little girl to school for the last time as a child, of course. She's turning 18 tomorrow. So, from being a single dad situation, that's quite an accomplishment. And the other one just graduated from the Marshall School at USC. So, pretty good week all in all. From a personal standpoint, the market is not doing a whole lot of much. So, it's giving me the opportunity to go ahead and play with those kind of things. But for some of you who've been around a long time, you know it's been a long journey since my wife passed away. So this was quite a moment. But from a market standpoint, you can see that we're just unable to get any kind of power direction whatsoever. You get the reset of steel and everything from that standpoint, but you're just kind of riding in a no man's land. And again, this is the uncertainty. Though we are seeing a lot of international developments. You've got troops massing on the border of Syria from the Turkish side. The Israelis have already invaded part of Syria. You have a potential where a bunch of U.S. allies are going to meet in the middle, along with the U.S., which has its bases in the Kurdish part of Syria. There's going to be some interesting situations if that isn't handled diplomatically. The Ukrainians escalated by terrorist bombing a Russian general. That could lead to all sorts of new escalations. You've got governments collapsing around the world. From South Korea, now even in getting close to home, Canada, Trudeau's in world of hurt. We have already seen the situation in France decaying with Macron failing. So there's just a whole lot of upheaval since Trump's election, and the effects of which haven't even fully played out. I've been talking about the potential collapse within the eurozone and I just see it getting closer and closer by the day. I know a lot of people would think that that's just a bizarre thing to talk about or even to believe, but with the kind of dynamic upheaval and this desire for individual sovereignty to regain its power away from the collective idea. I think it presents a lot of dynamic opportunities, but when we look at it from a reading standpoint here in the NQ, it's the one's keeping everything alive at this particular stage. So technology is still the force. Treasuries, for their standpoint, again, nobody wants them if they're not getting a decent yield, and this is where we get these inconsistencies with the auctions and the demand side of it. And most of the demand is coming from the Fed buying up the treasuries. So, what good is that? And it just points to the whole general ridiculousness of what the situation is. And ironically, you see the government has spent a record amount of money in this last quarter. This is Biden's desire to go out by spending massive amounts of money. I think they just gave huge load interest loans to PG&E in California for like $15 billion. They wanted to give them $30 billion. They only took 15, so they didn't have the initial payment. But can you imagine? This is that kind of untethered spending that I think people have just grown weary of because they see the net effect of it, and all it does is create inflation. You couple that with the massive costs that cities have been borne for the migration situation, and it's not going to get better. And any of these arguments that it's a net benefit, just foolish. It's been borne out over the last decades that it's not, never has been. What it has been about is population replacement to fill in the fact that most Western nations are failing because their population growth isn't significant enough, and every government can see, looking down the road, if you don't have a net population increase, it's hard to maintain a Fed model which is based on inflation, because you would have deflationary situations. Excuse me there. From the euro standpoint, like I said, it really isn't much help for it at this particular case. Barring some kind of meltdown in the U.S. Economy, there's just nowhere for it to go. And even if it didn't, they're really looking at struggling based on their policies. And, this is sort of gets back to what, China's issue with their one-child policy back in the 70s starting to haunt them now. They're not going to have enough for population replacement as well. And so this is where countries are going to have to look to either expand via military action or begin to implode from an economic standpoint. So these are things that will take time to evolve, but we'll start to see the ripples of them. And these are going to have definite market impacts. So we keep monitoring them. Gold, from that standpoint, interestingly enough, we get the reports that China bought a record amount of gold. And see, this is their preference. They'd rather buy the commodities now than move into U.S. Treasuries, where U.S. Treasuries used to be their primary thing. They were basically financing the U.S. for a large degree, and that sort of has ended now that you've had this shift uh, between China, Russia, and the whole BRICS setup. So just some bad politics, kind of messing up that U.S. world order dominance, and that also has forward implications going ahead. And these are things that we're going to start to see develop within the market. And here, this is a perfect example of its visual effect. Bitcoin and or any of the other crypto markets, it's not because they are a viable security. They are a outlet to get away from the abuses that homogeny has caused with dollar power globally, and the fact that they've been irresponsible with it. And there seems to be no rein in that responsibility now. Of course, you get the claims of Doge and that coming in that's going to make government efficient again. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. They've so entrenched with legislation in that it is nearly impossible. I mean, you literally would have to try and wipe out departments. And of course, there's a better chance of it happening this time than ever before. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. So there's a lot of entrenched interest and a lot of money that gets passed around. And it's just, we were talking about, the latest discussion has been about federal workers and how in the union agreement they just were guaranteed 5 years where they don't have to go to the office. Can you imagine? They're making six figures in a lot of cases, very high up there, and then you have to go to work. And that has economic impacts. If you don't move people around, this gets back to what we talked about during the pandemic and how, well, not that it was ever a pandemic, because it really wasn't. It was just a feigned government takeover of people's lives, but that's a whole separate issue. What it did, though, is by giving companies that money that didn't create any productivity and not having people going to work, means that all the little businesses and things that you would normally do by having to go to work and transfer and move around don't happen. And economies grow through movement. And it's the same with people. If they're not moving, then you have far less activity than you would otherwise have. So these are broad topics, but they are salient in the sense that they will impact what we begin to see in market moves, particularly as it relates to earnings of a lot of companies. From an ETH standpoint, when you look at this one, far stronger than what Bitcoin is experiencing. But then again, Bitcoin has an outside move in that it broke to the new highs and that. But powder's dry here. It's all been reset, so it's ready. Just looking for an impetus to drive it. Post market right now, European session looking strong. It's coming off of the softness. If we go back intraday here, you can see pretty wild activity, and this is to be expected. The breadth of the market right now is very weak, and that's typical for holiday. But some are saying, well, it's super extreme. It's a lot less. Well, there's just not a whole lot of motivation to do anything. The trade was the Trump trade, before the election and then right after. And now it's sort of like, we just have to wait and see. So that's where everyone's in a wait and see, and barring any global issues, that's a net positive, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get significant swings when you get these secondary traders coming in there. They see low liquidity in that, and they have opportunities to drive things, and then it goes too far, and then you get these big sharp bounce backs. So from an intraday standpoint, it can be kind of fun. As always, though, anything relevant, I'll put on the Skype chat. Have a great one. Trade well.